Hiring the wrong executive costs you time and money. Leveraging work psychology, Spear Consulting helps you hire the right executive so you can focus on growing your business. For a free quote, visit spiritmco.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Virtuous Heroes podcast. Excited to be able to have you on the show today. Leah, you're a real firecracker and excited to be able to dive into your own leadership journey. Our first question always is, who are you, so that people can really get a 10,000 foot level into your life and leadership journey.
Sure. Well, thank you, Christopher. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your work to help people think about leadership and the importance of leadership in community and society. It's really it's such a critical issue for us. And so thank you for the invitation. My name is Leah Yaw. I serve as Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for Devereux Advanced Behavioral Health. Devereux is a nonprofit behavioral healthcare network. We serve children and adults across the country, about 25,000 people a year. We have about 7,000 staff who do that work across the country, specifically in 13 states where we have large centers. Devereux cares for a great number of people. About half the individuals we care for are children, adolescents, and teens who've experienced extreme trauma in their life, who may be dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder or depression or other mental health issues as a result, or organically. And we also serve children and adults across the lifespan with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. Deborah is about 110 years old, so we've done this work for quite some time. And it's really a privilege and mission of service that all of us at Devereux share. I'm also a wife and a mom, and that's who I am.
Awesome. Well, I know we're going to dive further into Devereux as well and the impact that you guys are making there. But just to be present and mindful about what you just said, you said a wife and a mom. That's pretty awesome. Way to, resonate the servant leadership in all areas of your life. How many kids do you have?
Just one son, 17, getting ready for college. So it's a big time in our house with an only child getting ready to go off on their life journey. Very exciting and a little bittersweet for mom and dad.
Oh, awesome. So have you guys had a great plan on what to do when you guys are empty nesters? Or I'm like a couple months away from having my third child. And so bringing a baby into the house, in almost 40, I'm going to be 39 in September. So just having to kind of reboot the whole kind of the lifestyle we grew accustomed to. And so with that on my heart, I'm just curious as to what does the end of the parenting and childhood life cycle look like, of our goal of help them to be citizens and tax-paying citizens and leaders and being able to go off and take care of themselves instead of just being reliant upon ourselves too.
Well, it's very challenging. It is the strangest mix of being as proud as you've ever been in your whole life, and also maybe as sad as you've ever been, and joyous and worried. And it's just really, it's a wealth of emotions, I think, as it should be for any family. But our plan is to support him, help him pick the school that is right for him. I have a son who's very interested in service to others as a career, very interested in things like international relations and diplomacy and law. And that makes me very proud of him. So we want to help him choose a great school. And just a little tidbit for your listeners from someone who works in behavioral health care, the developing brain, especially the developing male brain, is not fully grown till age 25 or 26. So a lot of folks think 18, they're off on their way. They should be able to be totally independent. So our plan is to encourage his independence and build it, but know that we still have some years ahead of us where he'll need parents and he'll need that kind of support and backup. So
Yeah, it's like the whole element of your brain that's not fully formed around like a cause and effect, right? Like the impact.
That's exactly the part. Your prefrontal cortex, the executive thinking, the cause and effect, all of that takes longer than, science now tells us it takes longer than we thought to develop. And I think that's important for all parents to know. If you've got a kid who's 19 and isn't fully independent, not a failure on their part, not a failure on your part.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think I did my first load of laundry until my freshman year of college.
There you go.
So, and I can point to time and time again where my, prefrontal cortex not being fully developed, just making some really horrendous decision making.
Yes.
That point of life of when, people are thinking like, okay, he's in college and doing all the, should be doing all the right things, like not even close to it. So yeah,
not even close. And so I think that's an important message for us all. And it's important that we support our kids, right? I think that's a traditional value that we've maybe lost a bit, that sort of lifespan of family and community, really supporting our kids past the age of 18. And then also maybe taking care of our parents when they're older and maybe having them live with us, right? That's was for a very long time a very traditional kind of family life cycle when people stayed together and lived together in family community. And I think we've gotten away from that for a lot of reasons that we all understand, right? The world's big and people want to go out and adventure. But for our family, that's something that we are really working on. So we hope to be there for our son for as long as he wants and needs us. And we're also now making plans for my parents, to come and live with us in our home. So that's really our next step, to answer your question. Is we're going to have some new family members in our home, and we're going to look forward to spending time with them and helping them sort of in their journey.
Awesome. Well, that's amazing. And yeah, I mean, we're, my parents have 22, soon to be 23 grandkids.
Wow.
And all of me and my 5 siblings all live within like a 10-mile radius of each other. So, just definitely living that family lifestyle and being able to, kind of put family first. So yeah, so Leah, so how did you get to the SVP and Chief Strategy Officer position, leadership role for Devereux?
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, it was a long journey. I've been in my, professional life post grad school for 25 or 26 years. And it's taken sort of a series of steps and a lot of development, both professionally and personally. To get where I am. And it also involved, I think, some learning and some maturing and some values shifting along the way. My degrees are in journalism and communications theory and writing. And I do love to write, and I still am very lucky in my job now to have a lot of writing and speaking responsibilities. But, my plan was to be a journalist and really be sort of a hard-hitting news person. And I did that for a bit, and then was lured, very honestly, by money into the advertising arena. And I worked in an ad agency environment and learned a tremendous amount, learned a lot, but felt maybe not as fulfilled and felt like that wasn't really what I was looking to do with my life. And I had a client that was a behavioral health care nonprofit network, not the one that I work for now, a fellow provider, who was a client of mine at the ad agency. And they were always my favorite client. It was always a joy to work with them. It was always, I felt like it was a privilege when I got to work with them and help them with their communications issues. And in addition to really loving the work, I made friends with the people who were there. I made friends with, my contact and contacts at that agency. And they eventually asked me to join their team, to come in-house into the nonprofit environment, to do the work I do with communications and strategy and leadership for them full time. And I felt like it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Sometimes when you get a new job offer, a new opportunity, you really have to think about it, the pros, the cons, you have to make lists. It wasn't a 30-second decision for me when they asked me to come in-house. And they actually made that ask when they were in the middle of a significant crisis. So it wasn't a very happy and joyful time for the organization. It was a real time of crisis, and still it was probably the easiest decision I've ever made. I just felt very tied to their mission of service. I felt very compelled to be of use to the people they served, and went to work for them, worked there for 13 years. They were wonderful years. I learned a great deal, and really how I moved into sort of a senior vice president role, overseeing a big portfolio and overseeing strategy now at my new organization is I said yes to every opportunity that was given to me, including those that I didn't know that I could be successful at. So my background is in writing and communication theory and speaking and speech writing. And at one point, that organization asked me to also run fundraising, which is something in which I had no background. But I said yes, because I thought I can learn fast. I will work harder than anyone else. I will try harder. And if I fail, at least I will have given it the best shot I could, and perhaps I will have helped the organization in the process. So really, that's my answer to how I got to where I am. I said yes every time I had an opportunity, including when I was afraid that I would fail at something, and just then worked as hard as it took to learn and to accomplish and to succeed.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing on that, and also your honesty about, a certain career decision based off of money, which, I think a lot of people make decisions based off of that, but not many are willing to admit that that can be their primary driver at points in their career. And in addition to that, of just like the way you've just been able to grow. And I think that, sometimes we can definitely, especially in my day job of working as an executive search consultant and running an agency, I run into a lot of people that while they're in the middle of, executive level job changes, on how they can just, they can almost like, paralyze themselves through overthinking, instead of being able to, like you said, make the pros and cons list, see if it's something that is peaceful, and then be able to go with it. And recognizing that sometimes we may not have all the answers walking into those leadership opportunities, but it's through being able to really like grow through those that we really are able to set ourselves up for future opportunities as well. So, and I'm sure you probably saw along the way that many of those yeses have created the opportunity and pathway for you to be able to have the skills and talents that you needed in order to be in the role that you are today. So, thinking also about, kind of back on Devereux, I remember when we were, I worked with a bunch of different friends to form a nonprofit. And in that fundraising role, just having to really be able to tell stories that move people's hearts. Is there any in particular that you're particularly proud about at Devereux that gets you charged up to get out of bed every day?
Well, there are so many. It's hard to choose one, but I kind of have a go-to story because it represents so much of what Deborah does in so many ways. We very shortly after I came to the organization, I really started reading, learning, studying, doing some coursework around autism, right? That was not a specialty of mine from my previous organization. I had worked very deeply in the mental health sphere for children, but didn't know much about autism. So really started diving in and studying hard. And one of the things I did was meet with a lot of families that Devereux served who had children with autism or children on the spectrum, just to hear their stories, because you can read and learn and now watch videos and take courses online, but there's nothing like learning from the families. who you're serving, right? Who can really tell you about both the science and the heart of the issue. And this family was telling me about their 14-year-old son who had been nonverbal all of his life until he came to Devereux around age 12 and remained nonverbal, but had learned facilitated communication, something that's called functional communication in some to physicians and autism specialists. And there are many ways to do that. It can be done now by tablet and iPad. It can often be done by something called a PECS book, a picture exchange communications book. And so the technology now is wonderful with iPads, but 15 years ago, it really was a flip book with many, many pictures of anything and everything a 14-year-old boy could want, from food to games to activities to horseback riding, a picture of a horse. And so this family was telling me about what it was to love a child the way every family loves their child, but never be able to communicate with that child, and to feel like they would never in that child's whole life be able to actually have communication. And they had picked their child up for a long weekend from Devereux, and they were in the car together, all three of them. And the mother said to the father, should we stop for something to eat on the way home? Should we stop at a restaurant? And she said her son went through his PECS book, found the picture of the cheeseburger, and wrote out, I would love a cheeseburger, and handed it to her. And she said she just broke down in tears because and I will now too, that I'm telling the story, I cry every time, because she said that meant to her that every time she had told him she loved him for all his life, he had understood her. He had just not been able to say that back to her. And that was very moving to me. And I thought, this is an organization that facilitates family in that way, communication in that way. That's a wonderful thing.
Wow, that's incredible. And yeah, I can't even imagine, I think so many of us take the overlook the blessings and grace that we have in our lives of just being able to communicate with our loved ones. And you can only imagine how difficult that could be on a family to be in that. But then also the breakthrough that mom had to understand that her child had understood her so many times, that she had communicated her love that she had. That's incredible. So thank you for sharing that, for sure.
It's a great story. I love to share it, but I cannot, as a mother of a son, I can never get through it without crying. So it's a good story though.
So Leah, the show, the Virtuous Heroes podcast, before we kind of dive into the excellence side of leadership, we like to talk a little bit and get real with our listeners about what our journeys have been like, that, and some of the ways that we had to overcome ourselves in order to, be the leaders that we are. So can you maybe talk through some of the vices that you had to overcome in order to reach the leadership stage that you're at today?
Sure, of course. And I will preface it by saying that I still work through these vices really every day, right? These things I'm going to talk about are consistently challenges for me. I think the good thing is I've become very aware of them, right? And I've identified these as issues that I need to work on. I need to focus on consistently, whereas when I was 25 or 30 or 35, perhaps I didn't recognize them as the vices they are. And I guess I say that just to make the point that I know I still have a lot of work to do with this. And I hope that others who see this or who are in leadership know that it's okay to have to work on something really for your whole lifespan, that big issues are big and complicated, and they're never once and done kind of fixes. But to that point, I would say, really, in identifying those things I have to work on, it's impatience. I can be very quick to expect results in my professional and personal life. I really spend a great deal of time especially as a mother, honestly, thinking about the issue of patience, tolerance and understanding, and mindfulness, and working hard to not be impatient, to not expect other people, especially my son or my husband, to see things exactly the way I see them, or to do things exactly the way I would have them done, right? So patience is a real focus for me. It has been for a long time. It's always my New Year's resolution, really, to work on patience and to grow patience and mindfulness. And that's an important one that I stay focused on. I really stay as focused as I can.
Yikes. Can we take a pause there? Because like, you know, in the Christian church, one of the things that is communicated from the pulpit and, you know, from stages, etc., is like, you have to be super careful about praying for patience, because it's usually not one of those virtues that is just like, well, here you go, like, you're now patient. It's always like, well, there's going to be then lots of different circumstances that then pop up that require you to be able to work through and, you know, be able to enact that virtue of patience. And you know, I don't know if you've ever read the People Code. I think I've talked about it a couple different times on this podcast, but it's all about, like, they have like 4 different primary colors, and each color like has a driven motivation, or a motivation that drives that color. And so every single person basically has a primary and oftentimes a secondary, but the primary is like pretty clear. For you, Leah, similar to myself, I think I can always spot them as like reds. Reds are known driven by power, and like our tagline is, you know, get things done and get it done yesterday. You know, so I can just recognize that in yourself. And, you know, as you're just talking about impatience, of just being able to, you know, recognize that in myself too. But I think the other thing too is, like, I just find oftentimes with like knowing that, and I think that when I'm like tired or overworked, those are the times when like I might not have the same amount of like mental capacity to like recognize that this can be a shortcoming of mine. And like, even at a grandpa that would like be like just, you know, being way too over the top, and like his expectations of how quickly things could get done, or even like knowing, have I done the proper communication to make sure that people were informed to be able to do the job in the first place. So I hear you on that, sister.
I think that's very wise, that piece about communication. And that's for a communicator, I have to say that's probably also something I have to work on, right? So everybody has a particular skill. Some people's skills are with emotions or numbers. Mine happens to be verbal. And so I pick up words very quickly, and I really only need to be told something fractionally one time, and I know what's being communicated. And that's just a natural skill. That's not something I've developed. It was a gift, right? That's sort of my gift. And I've had to learn that I can't expect that from other people, in the way other people can't expect me to have that kind of facility, perhaps with, with numbers, with numerical equations, with valuations, right? My mind doesn't work that quickly with those things. Other people need more time and better communication around issues. And I've had to learn to really be thoughtful about that, right? Just because I said something quickly once in passing to a staff member or to my son, and just because that would have been enough for me to internalize it, it's really unfair of me to think that everyone's communication style is the same, and that they heard me, understood me, internalized it, and will go and immediately do it. That's not leadership, right? Leadership is really assessing your responsibilities and giving people on your team or in your family what they need to succeed. So that's been a focus for mine. And it was brought home to me, you know, in many ways across the arc of my career. But once, several years ago, a wonderful, successful, thriving staff member of mine brought like a reporter tape recorder into a meeting with me. She said, "You talk too fast. I'm going to start recording you, and then I can listen to you again afterward, and I'll have everything I need." And I thought, that's a great adaptation on her part, but that's a lesson to me, right? She was brave enough to do that and make the point to the team leader, I needed to internalize that and to make sure that my style worked with other people, because that's my responsibility as a leader. So I have tried to slow down and give people more time to listen, to hear, to ask questions and internalize. And for me, that takes patience. So I work on it, and I'm trying to be flexible in that way.
No one should have to grieve alone. Cassie's Foundation is a community dedicated to supporting you through the loss of your child by offering real support from others who've experienced the same. Go to @Cassie Foundation on Facebook to learn more, and consider donating to the Ms. Foundation today at msfoundation.org.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so thank you for sharing on that. And the thing that was just kind of coming across my mind, or was on my heart today while I was working, is also, I think you nailed it on the head, that people communicate and process things and learn things differently. And if we want to be effective leaders, or even leaders in the first place, it's cognizant upon us to be able to be mindful about the way that people are woven differently. And even today, like, just it's something as simple as like, well, some people like to email, some people like to text, some people like to call, and the more that you can like nail all that stuff on the head, just makes it that much easier to be able to really connect with people. But then that's on a very surface level. Then beyond that, it's just kind of like the way that people, what are their natural strengths, and what are the common themes that you see in different people, and knowing how to, is this person extroverted, introverted, and what are the ways that are really going to like leverage their strengths and make them happy and feel fulfilled too. Which I think the other challenge comes with it as well, is that you seem like you've done a lot of kind of like introspection, but a lot of people have not done the same amount of work, so to either A, they haven't done it, or B, have the ability to communicate it, right? Of like, here's how I work best and what I need. Not everyone has the ability to do that. So it's kind of like, as a leader, being able to start to recognize those things and be able to like love the people that you're serving in that way too.
I think that's a really important message. And I will say, I should have mentioned when you asked kind of how did I get here, in addition to the hard work and the saying yes, I have been very lucky to have some fantastic, not just mentors, but champions, right? Mentors and champions. I think a mentor is someone who takes you under their wing and teaches you. And I've had some wonderful mentors. And a champion is someone who really will advocate for you, right? And advocate for you in a position of leadership and really help you grow. So I've had both and been very lucky in that way. But on the point you were just making, my previous CEO said to me about leadership and building a team, don't make the mistake that almost all leaders make, which is to hire people who are just like you, because it feels good. When you're in an interview and you're interviewing someone to be on your team, and that person is just like you, their style is just like you, their skill set maybe is just like you 10 years ago, that feels good. And most leaders make the mistake of hiring that person. You want people on your team who are good at the stuff at which you are not good, whose weaknesses are different than your weaknesses. You don't want everyone to be good at exactly the same thing and bad at exactly the same thing, because then your team can only do one set of things. So he said, hire people who are different than you always and learn to work with them. So that was my previous CEO. And my current CEO, when he came on board, spent a lot of time working on team and team development, introspection, mindfulness, and the proper assessing of each other as team members. So we did a lot of sort of personality testing, and we did a lot of work style testing. So that was really a gift as well, because you can hone your skills to learn about other people and how to interact well, but it's really nice to have some of that facilitated for you. It's really nice to have some actual, Myers-Briggs or other kind of test to help you understand how your other team members work together. And so So, to your point that I've done introspection, I think I have, and I only get to take credit for part of it, right? Because part of it was really facilitated by a great CEO. And I really do have a great team of very different people. And I get part of the credit, and my previous CEO gets part of the credit for that. And that's leadership too, is working with people, identifying mentors, identifying champions, learning from them. And then when you get in a position of leadership, I think it's a real responsibility to do that for other people.
Awesome. Yeah. In my direct reports, I have all of the other colors in the people code. I've got a blue, a white, and a red. I don't have a yellow, which are driven by fun. But I think the thing that is interesting to me, and if Jaden's listening to this, each of them have a lot to teach me on the kind of like what they bring to the role and the differences of who they are. But the one that teaches me the most, oddly enough, is also my red that reports to me, which is my own color. But just it's kind of like, I think the analogy that I would give is your children mirror back to you who you are, for good or for worse. And so I think in some ways, just being able to see some of those, obviously the virtues that you're looking for in another person who's good with being able to get things done and execute swiftly. And I think what we talked about for a lot of Reds, some of our struggles around the vices are the impatience and the inflexibility. But then also just being able to with that impatience is can we let things breathe?
Yes.
The answer always doesn't have to be immediately, right then and there. That's sometimes right. It's just okay, I'm going to just let this kind of play itself out, and then the right answer will be able to come. And sometimes if we just try to force answers, we may not be, always taking the most calculated or the best approach that we possibly can be for whatever the initiative may be from a work initiative standpoint.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think, and I am learning something from my son, who is a new generation of people, right? Really, I feel like I'm really an awful lot like my parents. And I feel like my son is really a very different generation from me. And maybe that's the way all people feel as they age. But I feel like their generation, this generation of teens, is really very socially committed, very interested in issues of equity, social justice, commitment to others. I just love to see it. And also they learn a lot and they think a lot. And he is actually teaching me a lot about moderation, right? So overzealousness is for sure one of my vices. And it's also a strength, right? I mean, I care passionately about the people that Devereux serves. I've given my professional life to them. It's, aside from being a mom and a wife and a daughter and a family member, it's the most important thing in my life. And so I think that's been a strength. And I'm very driven to be of use to them. But I can also be quite overzealous. I can be quick to anger when I feel like politics or other issues are interfering with the ability to care for people who've been marginalized. I can just be very overzealous. And everybody says it's a marathon, not a sprint. And for a good part of my professional life, I lived my life as one continuous sprint. And you can't do that. That's not functional in the long term, truly. And when you're 25 and 30 and 35, it can feel like that is possible, but it really isn't. It isn't possible to work at that pace with that intensity 7 days a week until you're 65 or 70, right? At some point, you really have to think about moderation, caring for yourself so that you can continue to do good for other people. And sometimes that really does mean exactly what you just said, which is the answer doesn't always have to be obvious and present today, especially when you're working in a social service or behavioral health care sphere where issues are incredibly complex. And service to an individual might mean a lifetime of service. or addressing a broad societal issue or ill could take a decade through a legislative approach. These are big issues that require really sustained and constant effort. And if you just jump into them with everything you have and throw yourself 1,000 degrees or 1,000 miles an hour into it, you'll burn out before you get to a good solution that is helpful and useful to others. So that's been a real struggle for me too, is to appropriately moderate the right degree of zeal and energy to bring to any particular table so that you don't overwhelm a situation or a team, and that you don't overwhelm yourself, and that you're able to sustain work that will take years. Sometimes some of this work will take me my entire career, right? And then I'll hand it off to someone else. So that's been a leadership learning piece for me that I've really had to start wrapping myself around, I would say, in the last 3 years, right? What is sustainable? What is useful? What's going to work for the long term?
Well, yeah, I can't speak on behalf of the audience, but I think that's really, one of the fringe benefits of being able to do this podcast, outside of being able to build relationships and provide thought leadership, is the thought leadership for myself. So if they're not benefiting, I mean, that really is hitting me to the heart, and thinking about, some of the ways that we've thought through of growing out our agency and around our expectations, etc. So I really am appreciative of you for that. So thank you, Leah. So we talked about, communication and people's ability to perceive in the way that you've been gifted in that way. And then the same thing on how being overzealous can be, it can definitely be a gift, but then also a curse in essence if it's, way over the top. Are there any other virtues that you feel like, you've been naturally gifted with that you wanted to speak on? Because, yeah.
I would say, probably a decade ago, a really good friend of mine asked me, what do you want from your life? Really, what is it that you want at a huge macro level? And I thought, that's a really easy answer. What I want is to be of use. I want to lead a meaningful life of service that helps other people. I see, some people are empaths, and some people are, many different kinds of people in the world, right? And that's what makes it interesting. I tend to feel what other people around me are feeling. And I think there's a great deal of suffering in our world, right? And some of it is very obvious macro suffering, right? There are terrible things happening in many places in the world today, in the Ukraine, and people are suffering and dying. And I think that's obvious. And I think a lot of people can wrap around something that is that clearly a tragedy, right? And needs to be addressed. But there's a lot of sort of ongoing marginalization and suffering that people all around us are experiencing every day, right? And it has to do with many things. It could have to do with racism. It could have to do with misogyny. It could have to do with marginalization of the elderly or of people with disabilities. And I've always wanted to help. I've always wanted to use my life to do something meaningful that could help people who were being marginalized, or who were in pain, or who didn't have the resources they needed to be happy, to be healthy, and to thrive. And that wasn't something I had to develop. I guess it was just a part of my nature. And now, as I, am sort of approaching older age and look back on my life and maybe where I've been successful, that sort of inherent desire to be of use to others has just been ever present and never required a thought or effort on my part to develop. And I think that's been a gift. I mean, it's given me, I know lots of different people and people who love their work for many different reasons, but wanting to be of use and then finding a space of leadership in the nonprofit environment has given me something to do with my life that I really care about, that really matters to me, and that makes me feel useful. And that's been a gift. That's really been a tremendous gift.
So, what do you say to the person that's either in a nonprofit and feeling like they're supporting the wrong mission, or even someone that's on the for-profit side that feels like they're not attached? Because I think it's easy to just go attack the for-profit people that are like, oh, not making the impact, not doing like service to be able to like provide and, do some sort of like mission-based work, etc. But, just anyone that feels not as tied to the mission of the work that they're doing. What, having someone that, someone who's done, the majority of her career in mission-based work. Yeah, I would love to, kind of hear your thoughts on if anyone's listening to this and feeling not as drawn to the own mission that they've been working through, like what steps would you take?
So I would really encourage people, and I think that society is doing this a lot now after the pandemic in ways that they weren't before. I think that the effects of the pandemic, isolation, real worry for the health of loved ones, I think it's made us all think a lot about what we're doing, how we spend our time. And while the pandemic was awful and no one would wish for it, I do think that sort of a general societal assessment of things that truly matter has resulted from that. And perhaps something good will come for us all as a result. But whether it's because of the pandemic, you're just sort of assessing your life, I think it's really important, whether it's in your work or in your personal life, to do something that you really care about. And I've gotten very lucky. I've been able to mix that with work and be compensated for it. And that's, for me, has been the greatest blessing of my professional life. Also, if you are in the for-profit world and your work is important and you're supporting your family and you're doing, good stuff and it's working for you, but you don't feel connected to that work in that way, figure out what matters to you and find a way to volunteer around that. And that's something that I'm trying to instill in my son. He's looking at lots of different kind of careers, and I will support whatever it is he wants to do and be proud of him. But if he decides to go into the corporate environment, if he decides to become a financial manager or, whatever it is that moves him, I really have always asked him to think about, and will continue to ask him to think about what is in the world that he cares about, that he thinks is not being addressed. And if that doesn't become your career, then make it your private passion. Every nonprofit in the country has a governing board. If they're following the laws and the rules, they have a governing board of volunteers, right? These people are volunteers. They are not compensated for the work that they do, and they are critically important to the mission of the organization. And without them, the organization cannot run. And every nonprofit needs to rejuvenate and renew their board of directors all the time. That's a wonderful way to play a leadership role in an organization or on behalf of a mission that matters to you. And if you don't have the kind of time or engagement to serve as a trustee, then there is a volunteer corps wrapped around pretty much every nonprofit in the country. So if you love animals and you can't stand the thought of animals suffering and dying from starvation in the street, the ASPCA needs you and has work that you could do today that would help them. And if you really want to work on behalf of individuals with autism or children who've had trauma, Devereux needs you. And so do so many other organizations. And if the environment is your thing, right? The Sierra Club needs you. Whatever it is you care about, I just would wish that all people could find an outlet for that. And if it's not in your professional life, there's 1,000 ways to do it personally. And I really believe this when I say, I promise you, it will enrich your life. You will enjoy your life more for doing it. And you will make connections with people who care about the same things you do. You will be giving a gift back to something you care about: animals, the environment, children, adults, the elderly, music. And and it will be a real contribution, and you will be enriched for it. And
Yeah.
nonprofits can't run without that.
I was just so yes to all that. And if you were like me in my 20s and just totally self-centered and didn't care about anyone else, but knowing that you should, like, I knew that I should be involved in something, but I was just like, I honestly just don't care about like really like any of these causes. It's just like, just pick one and get involved, and you'll find that you'll find your path to where you need to be. It'll become evident to you. But sometimes the biggest biggest hurdle is just getting started. So just take
Absolutely.
that leap, pick one, and get going. So awesome. Well, thank you for that, Leah. What's your biggest challenge in your life presently? Would love to be able to close that in prayer.
Well, that's very nice. I would say my biggest challenge in my personal life is being a good mom.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the personal life, but if you want to go there, that sounds fine.
Well, I can do both, right? So in my personal life, it's being a good mom to a teen, right? So teens are growing and they need more space, and moms are still just moms. I feel like exactly the same mom that I felt like when he was 1 year old. So that's a struggle, and I'm really trying to do that correctly so that he can spread his wings and I don't smother him, but I keep him safe, and that's a real struggle. And I think in my professional life, leadership comes with benefits and challenges, right? And I think that right now, the biggest struggle for me professionally is thinking about and doing good work on the work of the day, whatever that is, but also taking time to develop the next generation of leadership. Because I'm getting older, right? And I'm starting to think about what the end of my career looks like, and I really need to do my part to help develop the next generation of leadership for the organization, and that needs to happen. But so does all of the work of the day. So that's a struggle to balance that, and I'm trying to figure out how to really be a good, responsible leader of my organization and help find the next group of folks who will carry the mission forward and do good work.
Awesome. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Saint Padre Pio. He's a past deceased now, but one of the things that his ministry he was really well known for was bilocation, where like he's in essence like off in another place doing ministry, helping people, while at the same time like in the monastery, like hearing confessions. and so I ultimately God is if we believe in a God who is the creator, then in essence then he is outside of time and space, and thus like he is not accountable to time. And so, yeah, I just pray, Leah, that God would bless you abundantly, especially like a noble desire of your heart like that God would just open the way for you to be able to, execute through on everything that you need to do from your own job and deliverables, but that also that it would just, the doors would open to be able to, help to pour your wisdom into those that need that kind of like hand up into that next level of leadership. And that would also apply to your son as well, that you would just be able to have the wisdom and guidance that you need to know when it's time to get in the weeds and when it's time to just, get out of the way and lovingly let him kind of figure it out for himself. So yes, God, we pray this through the mighty name of our Lord Jesus Christ, but also just wanted to thank everyone for being with us on the Virtuous Heroes podcast today, where we inspire virtuous leadership. If this episode has blessed you at all, please let us know in the various ways to communicate through the comment section, through social media. And if this episode also kind of like sparked some ingenuity of people that you think that would be great guests on the podcast, please let us know as well. But Leah, thank you so much for carving time out to inspire virtuous leadership for our audience, and many blessings to you.
Thank you. Same to you, Christopher.
Hey, Chris here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. To continue to grow in virtue, will you please subscribe to the Virtuous Heroes podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify? Or you could also visit us on the web at www.spiritmco.com. That would be tubular. Hope you have an awesome day.